Hey, welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz here today, and we are going to be talking about what Nebraska has done so far in the transfer portal. But we're actually going to start with what is left for the Huskers. It's been a busy, I don't even know, what do we say, 5 weeks? Probably about 5 weeks. The concept of time is just sort of
84 years.
Yeah. Concept of time is kind of irrelevant in the transfer portal window, but I think it's been about 5 weeks. Nebraska has been incredibly busy in that stretch. We're going to run through every position, but we want to talk about what is still out there. And Bruntz, there is one really, really large human being in the transfer portal that is considering Nebraska among other schools. Who am I talking about?
Well, that would be New Mexico State tackle Shiyazh Pete, who is in decision-making mode. It's been a quiet recruitment for the most part for him. But from what we've been able to glean, Nebraska, Michigan, Kentucky's hanging around as well. The sense is that Kentucky is perhaps more in the running than perhaps is being acknowledged publicly. So he also has connections to Vanderbilt. His former quarterback at New Mexico State, Diego Pavia, is there. Jerry Kill's there. And so there's some other schools with connections, but it's a big need for Nebraska. They're not going to go down without a really big fight for this one. And we'll talk about it, but I mean, this is kind of the one huge need that's left for Nebraska is finding another tackle out of the portal. You'd love to do it now, if possible, but that's the last big domino that Nebraska's kind of waiting on as of Wednesday at 10:30 in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, Shiyazh Pete would give Nebraska a guy with a ton of experience at that left tackle spot. Immediately becomes an answer for you at a position that right now is a really big question mark, and we're going to dive more into the offensive line, as we go forward. But the interesting thing, Bruntz, is this is a guy that wouldn't be arriving until after spring anyways, and so it's not like there's this immediate timetable in which he has to make a decision. But schools like Nebraska, Michigan, Kentucky, and others, they want that information as soon as they can get it, because if they do have to pivot, and I don't know that there's a pivot out there for Nebraska, but if they do have to pivot, you want that as soon as you can, because your next target might be a guy that is enrolling this spring.
Yeah, it's, you're kind of getting down to it a little bit. I mean, I know Nebraska can there's still more wiggle room to get guys into school beyond when classes start, but you'd like to know, or at least have an idea of what you're going to do at that spot, because, I mean, you look at what's coming back. I mean, you lose Bryce Benhart, Gunnar Gatula's got the shoulder stuff that he's dealing with. Teddy Prohaska's coming off the knee injury. Turner Corcoran had a season-ending injury. He wants to come back. Is he a tackle? Is he a guard? The annual conversation that we seem to have every spring.
He's never been a tackle, but we talk about it. He's only played it.
Yeah.
He's never been able to just be a guard.
Yep.
Except I don't know, back when the All-American Bowl had a little more juice to it.
Yeah.
Like 5 years ago.
You got young guys like Grant Bricks that, was believed to be a tackle, has been working at guard. Is he a tackle? Is he a guard? I mean, there's a lot of questions that need to be sorted out. And kind of the easiest answer is to just get a guy out of the portal that you can throw in there and poof, your questions are answered. So we'll see where that goes for Nebraska. They've taken a big swing. They hosted him. I think Nebraska's been prudent in some of its NIL stuff. I think this is one. This is kind of the situation where you empty the tank in the late innings here, if you need to do that. So we'll see. But that's kind of the last big decision that's out there, at least that's known, going into the end of what has been a very busy portal cycle.
Do you think in the collective office or in Matt Rule's football offices over there at the stadium, they've had the burn the boat speech?
Yes.
About
yes.
Pete here? You gotta burn the boats. There's no going back.
Yep.
This is a world in which you have to make it. You've got to make it. You've got no other options. There is no retreat.
They've gone down to the end of the dugout. They've had the conversation. You get one more inning. Just empty the tank. Give us everything you got, and we'll see if they're successful.
I wonder what the success rate is in Major League Baseball, because it is such a common thing, the burn the boat speech. It's you read enough baseball literature, you hear about how that's like a common refrain from managers, or when the players only meetings happen.
Yeah.
Usually comes out at that time. It's a very baseball heavy thing, but I'd like to imagine Matt Rule's going to adopt it here.
You got to use some discretion with that, I think, though. Like you can only go to that well so many times, and like
you can't do it more than once in the same season.
No,
though I'm sure it has happened.
Yeah, you probably don't want to be spending that one on like a getaway day in June against Kansas City or something. Like that feels like a playoff push type discussion.
Yeah. You can't burn the boats before like July 15th.
No, it's like white pants. You can't wear them before Memorial Day. Okay. Isn't that a rule?
I think it's a rule. And is it you can't wear it after Labor Day?
I believe so. Yes. Obviously we are known for our fashion acumen. As I sit here in a ratty ass stocking cap, so I would be the one that would know about the white pants rule. I don't wear white pants. So
speaking of fashion, I think we're both repping our 24/7 sports gear at the moment.
Yeah.
So clearly no one's as fashionable as company men like us.
Can I wear the white pants with a t-shirt? That's what I want to know. But anyways, yes.
Great with 24/7 sports, white pants.
All right. Yeah. Let's get to it.
Well, we'll get off of this, we promise. The other news we should at least touch on briefly: Jonah Wilson, a wide receiver that was recruited by Dana Holgorsen over to Houston, knows Daikio Shorts really well. Was it a target for Nebraska? It was more of a luxury, and ultimately didn't quite work out how maybe it was expected, and Jonah Wilson ends up at Texas A&M. The Huskers still with several other wide receivers that they've already brought in from the portal, as we will touch on here in a second. But other than Pete Bruntz, it feels very quiet for Nebraska in the portal. Now, there's still two teams that have players that will be entering the portal after their season ends, after the national title game here in Notre Dame and Ohio State. But I don't know how much spots Nebraska has left. And frankly, even if there's needs at this point, it feels like the internal development is probably the path instead of external options outside of Shiyazh Pete.
Yeah, no, I think that's kind of the approach. And I think that has to be the approach offensive line wise and defensive line wise. Like
100%.
It's so much easier to grow your own than to have to go out and pay for a guy every cycle. Like I think you can do that to kind of help fill in some gaps, but I mean it's still a 2 to 3 year position. And I know you've written about this a lot on the site. Like it really, that's the one spot where you need to make sure that you're still bringing guys along, because it's really tough sledding in the portal, because everybody's looking for bookend tackles. Everybody's looking for elite offensive linemen. Center is actually, I think, a pretty premium position in the portal. So it can definitely help whenever you're doing it yourself and not having to constantly rely on having to get it out of the transfer portal.
This could be a deeper conversation for another time, but I think one of the lessons I've learned through the 12-game playoff so far is that it's great to have an elite quarterback. It's great to have, a difference maker at defensive back or a great wide receiver. You look at the teams that are successful in the college football playoff, it's all up front. I mean, and it's always been this way. When Alabama was winning their titles in the early 2010s, they had the best offensive line in college football every year. But it's even more than that. It's Notre Dame's defensive line can wreck shop. Ohio State's defensive line can wreck shop. Texas, with a very average Quinn Ewers, really held down Arizona State for a large portion of that game because their defensive line can wreck shop. Like I think more than ever, you're going to see people invest heavily in the trenches, both with their NIL dollars and then what the portal and all of that. I just think, and that's that's a good sign for Nebraska, because what has Matt Rule really done in every stop that he's had? He's built great defensive lines, and I think they've committed a lot of resources to the offensive line. I think they understand that as well as anybody. But that is one of the big takeaways I have of just watching the 1 year of a 12-team college football playoff is the difference in offensive line play and defensive line play. Basically, the better defensive line has won every game this playoff cycle. So that's a huge portion of all of it. All right, let's just dive into it. We're going to go position by position, discuss what Nebraska has done in the portal, if they are done at that spot, and if we like what they've done. And we're probably going to go kind of rapid fire on this, but we will start at quarterback. Bruntz, Nebraska added one quarterback here. They lost one too in Daniel Kalen, so a 1-for-1 situation. What do we know about Nebraska's quarterback situation now as we kind of get on the other side of the portal?
Yeah, they lost Daniel Kalen, which you mentioned. They added Marcus Davila from Purdue, who profiles very similarly to Kalen. He's a little bit bigger than Daniel Kalen size-wise, but extremely productive in high school. Went to Purdue, enrolled early. Was a favorite of Dana Holgorsen when Holgorsen was at Houston. They worked very actively to try to flip him from Purdue, and were ultimately unsuccessful in that. It was going to be a tough one for Nebraska because you have an entrenched starting quarterback who's a sophomore. Like there's less than zero question about Nebraska's starting quarterback going into next season, and you needed to find somebody that was comfortable with that. But also could, come in and win you games if you needed to, and also allow you to move Heinrich Haarberg to tight end full time. Because if you weren't able to find somebody that fit that, you were going to be doing this kind of do-si-do with whether or not Haarberg was a tight end. Is he a quarterback? What are we going to do with it? Now he can focus all of his attention on making that transition to tight end, which I think is ultimately going to be a successful one. You also have Jalen Gramstadt, who is going to be coming back for a sixth season as a kind of leader in the room, I guess. And you're adding TJ Lateef at semester from California, who was with the team in New York, went through some practices. Nebraska kind of has at least a small idea of kind of what he can do there too. A little bit of a different quarterback, I think, than Dillon and Davila. So, a little bit of a different look. I'm curious, do you think, what's the ultimate, in the transfer portal era, how many quarterbacks are you probably carrying on a 105-man roster? Is it 4 or 5? I mean, it feels like you probably can't go north of 5, really, with the way the numbers shake out.
I think they kind of have the best possible situation right now, because you have a guy in Heinrich Haarberg that can be sort of an emergency quarterback. Like, I think Oklahoma had to go to Paul Thompson in 2006, who was playing wide receiver for him, and they ended up beating Nebraska in the Big 12 championship game, just saying, throwing the same 5-yard out route that Kevin Cosgrove couldn't figure out through various film study or during the game. And then you've got Haarberg there as your safety valve. But Davila can play the position, and Holgorsen's comfortable with him. You get to develop Lateef, and you got a guy in Jalen Gramstadt that can be a scout team quarterback for you, can be an emergency quarterback if you need it. He's a veteran. I like the setup that they have in their quarterback room. I think ideally you have 3 scholarship guys, a walk-on that you maybe trust, and maybe an athlete type. You're not going to have a Heinrich Haarberg every time, but somebody like that, on the roster that if you really have to go to it, you can gadget it up a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's. I think that was going to be a sneaky, challenging addition. I mean, and I think that's kind of been the conversation we've had, though, and that's probably the challenge of having a freshman quarterback that had the kind of season Dillon did. I mean, there was little question that he was going to be your starter, and there's kind of the residual effect of that on your future recruiting classes of how do you fill in behind him with guys that are comfortable with, knowing coming in that they're going to likely be second fiddle barring injury.
Let's move on to running back, where Nebraska lost Dante Dowdell, have not added anyone in the transfer portal, retained Emmett Johnson, who never actually went into the portal, still have Quentin Ives. They lost Gabe Irvin. So down 2, gain 0. And you bring in 2 freshman running backs that I know they like a lot, in Jamarian Parker and Connor Booth. What's your thoughts on running back right now? Do they need to add someone, or are you comfortable with this picture?
That's a tough one because I think Emmett Johnson is going to flourish in Dana Holgerson's offense with a full year to kind of get comfortable and allow him to game plan around him. I know that they like Quentin Ives a lot, and I know that Dana Holgerson likes Quentin Ives a lot and kind of what he can be as a rotational running back. Parker out of St. Louis, that was a really big recruiting win for Nebraska, I think, and a guy that, EJ Barthel did a really nice job of getting in on early, building that relationship, and they were able to get that over the finish line. So I still think you could benefit from a back out of the portal, maybe in the spring, if somebody's there that makes sense. But I think it's going to be a little bit of a different running back that they're looking for and skill set that they're looking for at that spot now under Dana Holgerson. You can totally convince me that I'm wrong there, but I don't. In 2 years, they've never really kind of pressed the panic button at the running back spot, which I've kind of found fascinating.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think everybody knows that I haven't been impressed by Nebraska's running back room, and since for a while, even before Matt Rule got here, it hasn't really changed. I think the key in all of this is Quentin Ives. Everybody over there likes Quentin Ives. No one else has had as strong of an opinion on Quentin Ives as Nebraska's staff. If he hits, they're going to look like geniuses. If it doesn't work out, then they better hope that Connor Booth or Jamarian Parker are able to play. I mean, I think that's all there really is to it for Nebraska at running back right now. It's Emmett Johnson, and you better hope he stays healthy.
It's I guess the one benefit, and I think that kind of the evaluation of that spot probably more than anything else in the offense was what I think was the benefit of having Dana Holgerson here in November. Like, he basically got 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks in November to kind of sift through personnel and see who could help. He had the bowl practices where it was a lot of young guys that were in there getting a lot of reps and kind of being able to show what they can do. So, I mean, I think that they're at least he's making an informed choice there, I guess, is the best way to say it. I mean, if you were coming in at the end of the season and you hadn't seen a lot of what kind of Nebraska had behind the curtain at running back, I think that would concern me a little bit more than maybe where they're at right now. I mean, I think they're kind of making a decision based on what he showed over the last 4 weeks of the season.
Should mention Mekhi Nelson also in the
Yes.
running back room as well. Sometimes forget about Mekhi Nelson, who reclassified and joined the team last summer. Pass catchers. We're lumping tight ends and wide receivers together. A lot of them left. Several of them have joined. We'll focus more on who is joining Nebraska. You have Dane Key and Hardly Gilmore IV coming from Kentucky, and Isaiah Hunter coming from Cal. Nebraska brought in 3, I think, really intriguing wide receivers and are hoping to maybe find some stability at a position room that I don't think Dana Holgerson liked much when he arrived in November.
No, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, they've flipped it. I mean, the 3 guys that they added, I mean, is there a world where you don't see those 3 in the top 6?
No.
When they go to Arrowhead, top 4.
Top 4 could be 3 of your top 4.
Yeah,
right there. If they think about Hardly Gilmore, how I have heard, that's a guy that's playing a lot for them early on. And you have Ja'Cory Barney. We'll see where Carter Nelson's going to play. You have the freshman coming in, but a lot of available playing time for these transfer portal additions at wide receiver.
Are we overlooking the return of Ja'Cory Barney in that group in terms of the portal haul? Like, I don't think there was ever any danger of him leaving. I mean, there wasn't any; those rumbles weren't there. But statistically, that's a huge return for Nebraska.
Where I'm at with Ja'Cory Barney is I'm excited to see how Dana Holgerson approaches this spring with him, how they want to use him. I think he's a really unique skill set. He's not just a true straight wide receiver. So is there a way that he can be utilized? Like, can you see Ja'Cory Barney in the backfield at times? Can you see him being used as a pass catching running back or lining up there or going into the slot or vice versa? I think there's a lot of versatility and a lot of different ways to utilize Ja'Cory Barney. I don't think that he is viewed as like a straight wide receiver in the same way that like a Hardly Gilmore or certainly Hunter or Key, who are bigger and going to play outside wide receiver. So I'm kind of fascinated what it looks like with Dana Holgorsen and Ja'Cory Barney this spring. That's one of the kind of the spring things that I'm certainly looking to keep an eye on when we get to spring football.
Is that the biggest story on offense to you, the wide receiver room?
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's no part of me that thinks Nebraska can have success if this wide receiver group isn't above average. There's no part of me that thinks Nebraska is built to be successful only running the ball with Emmett Johnson. You've got Dylan Raiola. You've got that arm. You need this wide receiver group to come together this spring. You need the talent to rise to the top. You need guys to play well. You need guys to stay healthy. I think it is a critical group. And I understand, I just got done talking about the trenches and everything else. But I think for this team to get beyond just being average or mediocre, you need these wide receivers to be great. Nebraska's wide receivers weren't great in 2024. I think they have a chance to be great in 2025, but I'm certainly not going to predict it because I, fell on my ass on that one last year at this time.
Yeah, I mean we've seen at Nebraska. I mean, if you're able to find a dude out of the portal at that wide receiver spot, makes your offense look a heck of a lot better.
Trey Palmer was a dude.
Yeah,
no question. Samari Toure was a dude too.
Also a dude. Quickly on tight ends. So Nebraska essentially gains a tight end in Heinrich Harburg moving there from quarterback. Nate Borkacher's off to Texas A&M. Thomas Fedoni not running it back. Concerns with that group? How you feeling about tight ends?
I am intrigued by it. We can't go more than a day and a half in 2025 without someone mentioning that Luke Lindenmeyer is their sleeper for the upcoming season. I mean, I don't think he can be sleeper material anymore. We've reached the point. No. It's like the Derek Jeter joke where he's been overrated for so long that he's somehow now underrated.
Yes.
Luke Lindenmeyer has been a sleeper by enough people in the Nebraska media and fan bases and message boards and Facebook groups and no longer a sleeper. Luke Lindenmeyer, no one's sleeping on you. That's a guy that I think everyone's excited about. We've heard Holgorsen talk about him. The guy I'm curious about, I don't know when he's going to be available, is Mac Markway.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is a guy that, I would have been fascinated if he would have gotten in at the end of last season with how things were sort of going, and he demonstrated down at LSU that he can handle the inline blocking aspect of being a tight end. Not much of a threat receiving the ball, but Nebraska may have a use for a guy who's nominally a second tight end or first tight end whose primary focus is, holding up at the point of attack and sealing the edge for you or chipping on pass rushers. So I think there's potentially a lot of value there. And, going back to not a sleeper Luke Lindenmeyer, I mean, we saw they put him in motion. They Chancellor Brewingtoned him. I don't know if I can make that sound how I want it to, but you guys know what I mean.
Yeah. No, with respect to Luke Lindenmeyer, I mean, I don't know that many people going into this past season would have put him towards the top of the list of their receiving.
They would not
tight ends. And I think Nebraska can scheme things up in a way that will take advantage of both he and Markway, certainly Harburg. And
what they do with Carter Nelson is going to be fascinating this spring.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other piece of it. Is he a wide receiver, tight end, move about guy, H-back? What is he? Because I think you could probably lump him in with the tight end group too, depending on how much weight he gains this offseason.
Offensive line. They've got one in Cade Pritchett. They lost some guys to
Elijah.
Exhausted. Yeah, who's Cade Pritchett? Did I just make that up? Is that a baseball prospect?
Maybe, yeah.
Elijah Pritchett. I don't know where Cade came from there, but whatever. We'll move on. Elijah Pritchett in Nebraska lost several guys who have exhausted eligibility. They have a lot of question marks. We talked at the top of this podcast about Shiyazh Pete, and you know, he's going to be able to if you can get him, if he just comes in, he's your in Sharpie left tackle. I have a lot of questions about Pritchett. Like, I probably have been the cold water on the enthusiasm some have had about getting a former 5-star from Alabama, but the Pro Football Focus numbers, even if you don't believe in those a lot, they usually are a good illustration for someone's consistency or their ability. And he really struggled in a great conference in the SEC, not the best conference in football, mind you, but a good one. And so he went up against a lot of really talented players, but he didn't play well. And so now you add this to your roster, and you invested a lot of NIL resource into him, I'm sure. So he's going to play, and I think he's your right tackle if you're able to get, you know, Pete, and he can be your left tackle. But I wouldn't just expect any sort of upgrade from what you got from Bryce Benhart. The sort of hilarious thing to me is if Bryce Benhart was available in the portal and his name was Joe Smith and he was coming from another school, people around here would be clamoring for him in a hilarious way.
Yeah, well, he profiles as a tackle that would be very coveted. And I mean,
yeah,
he played like 200 games at Nebraska. But I agree. I mean, I think if Pritchett, not Bryce Benhart, who's out of eligibility now, if Pritchett,
Elijah, not Cade.
yes, if Elijah Pritchett, I think from talking to people at Alabama, he's a guy that would perhaps benefit from a change of scenery. You know, I think there's probably more development there for him. I think there's kind of this misnomer sometimes that when you see somebody with Alabama attached to their name, that you automatically assume that they're somehow just a finished product, you know, and that's certainly not the case here. And he's going to get a long runway at Nebraska to grow and be a tackle. And, you know, we'll see if Nebraska can unlock something a little bit different in him. You know, I think that's probably the fair way to discuss it. I mean, I know you said you've kind of been to cold water. I mean, I don't think you're alone in that, just from kind of listening to the chatter around him. You know, I think his struggles at Alabama were fairly well documented. I think he's more than adequate as a run blocker. But, you know, we'll see. I mean, I think I think a small amount of skepticism is probably a healthy thing, especially when it comes to portal guys. Like, they need to contribute. A lot of them are going to need to contribute right away and be guys for Nebraska. But I think it's also okay to understand that, you know, look, like, there's probably a reason that they're leaving, whether it's, you know, change of scenery. I mean, maybe they're just chasing a check, but, you know, I think from my sense has been that, you know, it was probably for him to try to find another home just for a change of scenery.
Real quickly, Cade Pritchett, class of 2018 from Mitchell, Indiana, now in law school at Indiana
I saw that.
University.
Yep.
So shout out Cade Pritchett. You are on a podcast you'll never listen to. Moving to the defensive line.
Is he in the portal though?
I don't know.
No.
There's like a part of me that wants to send him this episode and be like, "Hey, you made it. You didn't get recruited in football, even though you do have a huddle page, but you did make it."
We discussed you for several minutes on a Nebraska football podcast. Sorry.
Turns out you're not going to be a tackle.
Yeah. Yep.
Defensive line, Nebraska added several pieces. I'm a little baffled. I won't lie on this. I'm a little baffled at the strategy here because I don't know that Nebraska has a nose guard. But what they did add in Williams Winery is a high upside potential defensive end, maybe an edge player, maybe a jack, but more than likely a defensive end in the mold of a Jamari Butler once he continues to grow into his body. And then two sort of fascinating guys that range from really productive at the FCS level to never played a snap and was on Mississippi State's roster for 2 years. Gabe Moore, from Mississippi State, and then Jalen George, I believe is the name, from East Tennessee. Bruntz, what do you make of what Nebraska's done on the defensive line? Because they've got to replace a lot of production. And yes, you have Riley Van Poppel, and yes, Keona Davis is back, and yes, Cam Lenhart is right there, and you've got Elijah Judy, but out the door is Nash Hutmaker. Out the door is Ty Robinson. Out the door is Jamari Butler. Out the door is James Williams. Out the door are multiple backups that were in your system for a few years. Quietly, this is the biggest question mark on Nebraska's team for 2025.
Yeah, we're back to the the pre-2023 discussion about how's Nebraska's defensive line going to hold up. No, I think Nebraska is betting on Van Poppel not being Ty Robinson, but being very productive. I think they see flashes of what Judy can be. I think you saw it a little bit towards the end of the season. I don't know that they were going to find Ty Robinson in the portal. Like, I don't know that they were going to find Nash Hutmaker in the portal.
They weren't going to pay for it either, I don't think. I think they really like what they have. We just haven't seen those guys at the same level that we were getting big-ass Ty Robinson and the Pinstripe Bowl.
Yeah. No, I think Jalen George is a guy that they really like as an end. Like, he was very productive. People roll their eyes because it's the FCS level, but I know Nebraska likes him. They targeted him really early when he hit the portal, and I think he's going to be a guy that they're going to count on to come in and be in that rotation right away. Gabe Marks, I have less of a sense of, but he's a big body that can potentially play in the middle. Nebraska was still hosting defensive linemen as of last week. They had TJ Lindsey, the Auburn transfer on campus. He ended up going to Purdue. So I don't know. I mean, that might be one spot that once you get through spring, you see what's in there, what's in the portal, and maybe who can help you. But I think they kind of like the kind of core group that they have. And I mean, you have to remember, Terry Braden's not even on campus yet. He's still coaching the Chiefs in the playoffs. So maybe he'll think differently, but I think that's maybe another reason why they're being a little bit cautious with, trying to bring in a ton of guys too. I mean, I said this yesterday on 1620, like when Williams Nwaneri, when he shows up for that first spring game or first spring practice, and it's like the open availability, it's going to be like when people saw Randy Gregory for the first time. Like, he looks like a dude, I mean, 6'7", 255. Like, the ceiling is insanely high there. It's just a matter of whether Nebraska can unlock that.
Who's the Alex Lewis in this scenario? Is it Elijah Pritchett? Because the famous Alex Lewis, Randy Gregory knockdown, drag out brawl that prompted John Garrison and Rick Kaczynski to be in a screaming match with each other. God, that was a day in spring of 2014, I think.
Yeah. But you remember that the first open practice when Gregory showed up, it was like, okay, this person looks different than one of these defensive linemen is not like the other. And that was my sense is that that's how it's going to be for that first open availability in the spring for Nebraska with him.
Matt Finnan tells a funny story about how, like, he arrived around the same time as Randy Gregory, and then you're going up in practice, and he's like, I played JUCO, and that guy wasn't in JUCO.
Yeah.
Like, referring to Randy Gregory, who was also a JUCO, but down in Arizona.
Yeah.
Very, very good player. Still in the NFL, I think. Who did he play for?
He was with the Bucks, and they very quietly cut him, I believe, for off the field stuff. So I don't know if he's with anybody right now, but still, I think he's got to be pushing 30 by now, but he's hardly played.
No one will believe this because of all the off the field stuff, but he was a fascinating individual to talk to. Also, like, a really good piano player, like very musically inclined, just a really, really fascinating guy. And all anyone's going to remember is the off the field issues. unfortunately. Anyways, let's jump over to linebacker. This is an area where I love what Nebraska did here. I really like they get Deshaun McCullough, which I don't know exactly what position he's going to play. I don't know that they know exactly what position he's going to play. He could line up as a jack. He could be a rover. He could be, just one of the two inside linebacker spots. And then you also added Watson Trent, Marquez Watson Trent from Georgia Southern, who was the Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year. And they're both one-year guys. So you're not going to be blocking your Dawson Merritts or your Christian Jones or some of your younger linebackers that are going to get a year to kind of learn and pick these guys' brains and see what they're able to do. Yes, you lost Mekhi Bayer and you lost Prince Will Umamielen, but I feel good about what Nebraska has at linebacker. And I also, some of that, I just trust Rob Dvorak. And he is probably in that initial staff that Matt Rule put together, someone that no one was all that enthusiastic about because you didn't know much about him. He's kind of come out of this looking like maybe the best guy that Matt Rule plucked from Carolina or has brought with him into this sense. Am I overspeaking a little bit there?
No, I think it was, I think the pod that BC and I did, we talked about him a little bit. And I think over the last 2 years, he's earned the benefit of the doubt that he's going to kind of bring those guys along when you consider that, John Bullock was a walk-on safety that they moved to linebacker. And, Vincent Shavers certainly is talented, but, to play that large of a role as a true freshman is somewhat rare. Mekhi Bayer was not Mekhi Bayer when Matt Rule and his staff came. And I think it was that group among many, it was important that they add some veteran guys because you needed to bridge the gap a little bit, especially with Bayer moving on. You get Wright back, which that's huge. You get Watson Trent from Georgia Southern, who I think can be extremely productive at this level. And like you said, you're not really blocking the development of Christian Jones, Mooberry, and Merritt, who that's a pretty good haul of linebackers that you added right there as well that are going to kind of be the next guys up. So I don't know. I think that was a pretty strong concern for me about how they were going to kind of reset the deck there. And I think they targeted some guys that, are going to give them some versatility in how they scheme up defensively with McCullough, and then somebody that's just going to be solid in Watson Trent, who's played just a ton of football through his career.
Let's dive into the secondary. I believe there's more than one addition. There's several corners. You have Andrew Marshall, you have Amir Khan, and you have Justin Rhett. Is there anybody else Nebraska's added in the defensive backfield that I'm forgetting?
Groves Killebrew from Arizona.
The other one.
Arizona via Louisville from Texas A&M.
On his fourth school. So he's sort of the one. He's the guy that could end up playing corner, could end up playing safety, maybe a bit of a hybrid. I have kind of pushed that I felt like Nebraska needed a veteran safety. They added Justin Rhett, who I think they like for the future. They have two corners in Marshall and Khan that are going to be part of the mix to sort of decide who's opposite of Sierra Wright, where you've got Donovan Jones and you've got Bly Hill and whoever else they have end up playing corner. The safety picture, though, is just kind of fascinating, and maybe that's where Groves Killebrew sort of fits in here. I don't know. How do you size it up, Bruntz?
Well, I think with some of the corner additions, like I think it's safe to probably assume that Marshall's going to be in the top 3 that Nebraska has at corner.
That's my assumption, but I don't know without us actually getting there.
Yeah. Well, I think what it does is by adding the corners, you're freeing yourself up a little bit to keep guys at safety, because it's felt like, you had guys that could play both. Some guys had to play both. Does this allow you to keep Buford at safety full time? what do you do with Malcolm Hartzog? Is he a nickel corner? Is he a safety? Where do you play him? There's young guys that they like, and they brought on trips for most of the second half of the season, and Caleb Benning and Braylon Prude. There's other kind of rovers that were behind Isaac Gifford, Kamir Prescott being one that we haven't really seen yet. Is Donovan Jones, is he a corner? Is he a safety? Is he a rover? There's so many questions that need to be sorted out. Yeah, Ramir Stewart. And it's, guys that we haven't really seen. I mean, Bly Hill's still there. I mean, what does his long-term picture look like? So, I think you're bringing guys like Marshall that you feel like can kind of come in, start for you right away. Khan's kind of the same way. They're guys that have played a good amount of football. Groves Killebrew, to me, feels a bit like a Sierra Wright situation where a guy is a very talented athlete, has not maybe found a place where it's worked for him yet, and you're hoping that you can do for him what you did for Sierra Wright last season. And, maybe things take off there, maybe they don't. My sense is if you're kind of looking at that 105 number, this spring is going to be huge in that secondary and who's there and who's not, because they've got a lot of scholarship guys in that group, a lot of things to sort through, and a lot of guys that have not played much at all at Nebraska to kind of see what you got. So I think more than any position on the roster right now, that secondary is going to be, for lack of a better phrase, it's going to be pretty hot and heavy back there this year during the spring to see what they can find for kind of that top group, because you've got some veteran guys, but it's a lot of newcomers and a lot of young guys that are vying for those snaps back there.
Well, and you've also got a weird deal where you've had basically 4 different defensive backs coaches within the last 5 years. So
that's kind of, you could set your watch to that, though. Like, how many DB coaches have there been in the last 14 years?
You had a nice run of Travis Fisher for a while.
Yeah. Like that was
the one consistent sort of run, but yeah, it seems like Nebraska has a different defensive backs coach every other year.
Yeah, you needed Travis Fisher to kind of make up for some of those years where it was just a new guy every year, or in some cases you had multiple guys in the same year. So
we're already 42 minutes in. How many defensive back coaches can you name starting? Oh man, I mean, if we go into the Callahan era, you split between DB and safety, right? Like you have 2 different guys.
No,
there.
let's start in the Big Ten, because that's when it got a little
Big
hectic.
10.
So I'm trying to think. Okay, Corey Raymond.
Yes.
Terry Joseph.
Technically, was Corey Raymond there for 2011 or 2012?
I think
no, he's there for 2011. It was 2011
because
Corey Raymond, Terry Joseph. Yep.
Yeah, and because Corey Raymond, after the bowl game, very quickly realized he wasn't in the SEC at Nebraska. Let's see, Terry Joseph. This is terrible.
Charlton Warren.
That's right. Let's see, Riley era. You had Brian Stewart. You had Bob Elliott, the late Bob Elliott. Scott
Booker.
Scott Booker.
You're forgetting a big one here.
Dante Williams.
There you go.
I'm trying to go in chronological here. So Dante Williams was last year of the Riley era. Then you had a good run of Travis Fisher. You had, let's see, he was all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Bush, did he technically have defensive back coaching responsibilities?
He was a special teams coordinator. They got elevated to defensive coordinator and coach safeties.
So no.
So I wouldn't count it, but you can if you want.
No, that's okay. And let's see. So rules staff, it's been Addison Williams.
You're starting from now to going to the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on.
Well, he's at Florida State now.
Evan Cooper.
There you go.
And
Nebraska's defensive coordinator.
Yeah, John Butler.
There we go.
How many is that?
I stopped counting.
Okay.
Part of it is the
10?
Mike Riley experience, where unfortunately you end up with both Bob Elliott and Scott Booker because Bob Elliott passed in 2017. You had Charlton Warren for 1 year, I think. Or did he coach under Bo and then left right away under Riley, and then you ended up with Brian Stewart? Did you even have Charlton Warren under Mike Riley?
I'm trying to remember. This is terrible.
Terry Joseph left after 20. You had to have a defensive backs coach for 2014. That was Charlton Warren. 2015, I'm pretty sure, was Brian Stewart. 2016 was Brian Stewart. 2017 was Dante Williams, Scott Booker, and Bob Elliott.
Yeah. I feel like I'm missing one in the early Pelini era.
Well, so Marvin Sanders would have left by the end of the 2011 recruiting class. Like everybody that was forced out or left after that class signed, because that's when they made the roster changes or the coaching staff changes. And then that's when Corey Raymond came in at that point in time.
Who would have been the DB's coach in 2011?
Corey Raymond.
He's not listed here.
Well, he should be. I remember because I went to a Big Red Breakfast in which he was the featured speaker, and it was the fastest Big Red Breakfast in recorded history.
It was quick. So Terry Joseph took over in 2012.
Yep, left after 2013, I think.
Yes. Yeah, so that's right.
The portion of the podcast that nobody knew that they needed when we tried to go through all of Nebraska's defensive back coaches since the Big Ten era started.
Charlton Warren was in 14.
Yep. So right there you have 4. You have Raymond, 2 years of Fisher, or 2 years of Terry Joseph, and then Charlton Warren. So that's 3.
Brian
Stewart's 4. And then you end up with the Dante Williams, Bob Elliott, Scott Booker. So that's 7. And then Travis Fisher's 8. Evan Cooper's 9. John Butler's 10. And Addison Williams will be the 11th defensive backs coach Nebraska's had since 2011.
Wow. What a run.
And that, like I said, it's a little misleading with everything that happened in 2017, but still, it's, no other position has quite that level of turnover.
No. We haven't talked special teams yet, by the way.
Yeah, that was the last one to get to, but we were busy going through the names.
We're doing our own personal little sporkle here of Nebraska defensive backs.
We missed the 30-minute mark 17 minutes ago. So we're going deep into this one. Yes. You're welcome.
So special teams. What do you make of that?
I'm excited. They went out and they addressed right away. They got Kevin Gallick. They got McAllister. I have no idea if Jack McAllister is going to be a good punter or not. No idea. You look at his numbers, and they're not all that dissimilar from Brian Buschini. So if nothing else, you probably have a similar punter in that regard. But will he be better than Buschini was capable of being because the snaps are going to be better and consistency could be there? Could the coverage unit be better? Could you reliably get someone that can down the ball if it, drops inside the 10 and they're standing where they're supposed to be? So all of those things are going to be factors. We don't know who Nebraska's special teams coordinator is, which is bizarre because they went out and they added the punter and the long snapper and a kick returner all before naming their special teams coordinator. It's a weird deal. I don't know. It leads me to believe that they may not have a full-time special teams coordinator as a coaching position. It might be an analyst. It might be Matt Rule more heavily involved. I don't know what's going to happen in special teams, but I like that they addressed it, and it felt like they addressed it with more urgency than they addressed special teams at any point during the 2024 season. Yeah,
if you were like that was a group that they were going to address quickly. Like, Gallick visited quick. McAllister was quick. Like, I mean,
Those were first week guys.
They honed in on who they wanted and they got them. I mean, I think an upgrade personnel wise, will help. I mean, certainly the scheme part of it, like you said. I mean, a guy can be a great punter, but if nobody's there to cover it, it doesn't help you. But it seems.
What's your confidence in John Hole?
I think if the snap's there, and the hold's okay, I think he can put it where it needs to go. I mean, I would need to really kind of go back and Zapruder film it to see how the snaps were on and holds were on each of his kicks, but it seemed like when everything was kind of going as it should be, he was able to make some field goals. I mean, he's got the leg strength is there, so I think they feel good about him. So I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know because it's, when the snap's not where it needs to be, or the holder's fumbling with it because it's, the snap's not good. I mean, that's a tough place to be as a kicker. And I think it helps. I think it helps having Brett Maher around. I mean, I think he's been really valuable for John Hole. So I don't have too many huge concerns with him. And I mean, Tristan Alvano's still around too. So you got two guys that have at least had to do it on a big stage.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Alvano next. I mean, do you think that's a competition throughout the spring and then the summer, or do you think it's John Hole's job now?
I mean, I think there'll be a competition. I think who's the first guy out? Probably Hole, just based on last year. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if that's where.
But what if you get Tristan Alvano as healthy with good snaps? Like, I mean, this is a guy that people were really excited about because of what he did in high school. And he was a very, very good kicker. I mean, it's a weird deal to have.
Sure. Having two options helps you. I mean, there's competition there. But yeah, I mean, I think main takeaway, I feel okay about John Hole because I don't put the bulk of his issues last year at his feet.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, basically, when he did what he did at Ohio State, I was convinced that they had a guy that you could trust.
Yeah, you and Gus Johnson.
Well,
Gus Johnson, John Hole.
He wasn't nearly as excited as Gus was, and those calls still fascinate me even to this day because they were such dead center kicks.
Yes,
it was never a question like you were never like, oh, does he have the leg? It's like he very clearly has the leg, and it was never like, oh, is it going to hit the upright? No, it was never near the upright. Yeah. But the way that those got called, you're like, oh, man. If you were just listening to it, you're like, oh, what a squeaker. And it's like, no, it cleared it by about 8 yards.
He just made an 80-yard kick, and it barely cleared the crossbar.
Hey, it's Sebastian Janikowski. Oh, man. All right. We have covered every position. We didn't go as fast as we intended to.
No.
This podcast went longer than we intended to, but hopefully people enjoyed it. And if you want more content like this, you can find it at Husker247.com, where we have all the coverage that you want and need on Nebraska football, on the transfer portal, on the recruiting. It's been a dead period, so the coaches have not been out as there is a big convention going on right now. Coaches get back on the road starting tomorrow. You're going to potentially have visitors for those that are still hosting players in the 2025 class. You can have portal people on campus. We think Nebraska is going to be relatively quiet, though. They don't have a lot of roster space left. There hasn't been any 2025 names that have popped up that they have been linked to. And Pete is the guy at left tackle, and that would be a pretty nice pickup for Nebraska to cement Bruntz what I think it's been a productive and overall good transfer portal period for Nebraska. I think they have largely achieved what they've set out to do.
Number one portal class in the Big Ten, according to 247 Sports. Number 6 overall. I agree with you. I mean, I think it's a nice mix of guys that are going to be huge pieces of the roster in 25, and also, hitting needs that they had to with depth guys too. So it's a remarkable shift, I think, from the way Matt Rule approached the portal the first 2 times around.
Agree with all of that. All right, everybody, we will catch you with some more Husker 24/7 content on the podcast feeds, hopefully later this week. If not, we'll catch you next week. And be sure to check out everything we got going on at Husker247.com.